The Rogue Prince of Persia is the newest roguelite from Evil Empire, one of the makers of Dead Cells. Does this game fill those huge Dead Cell shoes right now? Definitely not. This game is a true early access game with missing content and incomplete game systems. But it is still fun, and it has a lot of potential to grow into something special. So let's get into it. In the Rogue Prince of Persia, you play as said Prince of Persia in a 2D platformer roguelite. You're given a main weapon, a secondary weapon, a kick ability, and 4 medallion slots that make up your build. Unlike a standard dash, you have a vault skill that launches you over enemies. And there's also a wall jump that can be used to jump off standard side walls, as well as a background wall when applicable. When I first saw the trailer for this game, I thought the movement looked kind of weird. And when I first started playing, I felt that way too. But as I played more, I began to quickly enjoy the movement system, as well as how your arsenal of moves interact with that combat system. So let's talk about the actual combat first. Each primary weapon has a different moveset, as well as a different charge attack that can have different effects, like stunning enemies with the starting dagger. The secondary weapons are usually some range damage, like the starting bow, that's useful for finishing off enemies or picking off challenging enemies from afar. These attacks must be charged up by damaging and killing enemy units. There's nothing incredibly special about these different movesets of these weapons, but they all do a good job of feeling different from each other and feeling fun to play around with. Where the game starts to feel unique comes in how that combat interacts with those movement abilities to create a very acrobatic feel. For one, this vault acts similar to a dodge, but has some notable differences as well. Mainly, the ability does not allow you to actually dodge any attack that you want, because it doesn't give you reliable invulnerability frames. Instead, it's only effective at dodging attacks when you're right next to the enemy and you vault over them. This can also allow for repositioning, which can be important with enemy targeting and prioritization. While all enemies have a health bar, sometimes they also have shield as well, and that can be removed by normal damage, or can be removed by kicking other non-shield enemies into them. On that note, enemies can also be kicked into walls or into hazards like spikes that kill them instantly. This kick ability is really fun to use, and you can use it on solo enemies for the effect that it has, but it's also incredible at groups of enemies because you can remove shield and stun enemies by knocking them into each other. Finally, this game also has a dive attack, where you dive down from a height to deal damage, stun enemies, and also remove shield. Again, this ability meshes well with the movement and gives that game more of a deliberate movement feel, kind of acrobatic as I said earlier. The combat system feels less intuitive than some other games like Dead Cells, but it's still very learnable, and it feels very unique to play through. Again, I really did not like the movement animation at first, because it looks like your character's running through water or with weights attached to his cape. But as I started jumping between poles and beams, once I started wall jumping off the side wall, then off the back wall, and then back onto the side wall, once I started doing all these things together, the game began to feel a lot more fun. I never played a Prince of Persia game before, but I do know that it directly inspired those classic Assassin's Creed games that I have played. And I will say, the movement in this game captures that vibe that I remember from those games very well. The one thing I don't like about the movement is how weirdly sticky, for lack of a better word, the walls are. Your character is so eager to climb walls and jump off them that it's sometimes hard to actually drop off of the walls when you want to. And there have been times where I keep accidentally climbing between 2 obstacles for quite a while before my character actually drops down like I want him to. But as a whole, once you get your hands on this game, it feels unique, it feels fluid, and it's fun to play around with. Build-wise, you have 6 parts, your 2 weapons and your 4 medallions. The medallion system is interesting, and not quite like anything I've seen before. Medallions give specific effects for your abilities or other passive benefits. For example, one medallion makes vaulting over enemies deal damage to them, and another medallion makes all attacks that hit enemies from behind deal more damage. Each medallion can be placed in any of 4 slots in a row. Depending on where you place it, each medallion will level up other medallion slots. For example, one medallion might level up the one slot to the right of it. In turn, many medallions have increased effects depending on how many levels they have, like the medallion that gives gold on killing enemies, giving more gold per kill as you level it up. Because of that, how you range your medallions and how you use those limited slots matter. I quite like that strategy element of how you place your medallions and thinking through how you want to combo them. But at the same time, I think a lot of the medallions in this game feel moderately impactful at best, and there are some combos, but they're fairly simple. And along with that, while the weapons have different movesets that all feel good, they don't really interact with the medallions that strongly. The build crafting in this game just feels pretty half-baked at the moment, and I've never really had any memorable builds while playing. There are a couple elements that are nice, but it never comes together in a satisfying, cohesive way. The final thing I'll say in this gameplay section is that on initial launch, I had a decent amount of bugs, some of which were pretty game-breaking. For example, my first couple of playthroughs, even after I died, I kept the effects from medallions that I'd acquired on past runs, which, as you can imagine, was pretty powerful when I could effectively, unlimitedly stack medallions. I will say though, every bug that I've encountered in this game has been pretty quickly patched. And as of this latest patch, I haven't really been encountering any bugs as I've been playing through it, which is good. But again, this game still feels early access, as I'll come back to later. Now let's talk about variety and randomness in Rogue Prince of Persia. The most impactful source of RNG and variety comes in the form of the medallions and weapons that you find along the way. As I've said before, the medallions can be moderately impactful, but are never game-changing. So it does feel different run to run, but it never feels like extremely different based on what medallions you find. I think using different weapons as you unlock them can create some more fun combos and variety. I liked all the different movesets, and some of the secondary weapons are fun and unique, like one that mimics an attack from the first boss. At the same time though, because of that lack of synergy between medallions and weapons and just overall lackluster build crafting, that run-to-run variety felt less impactful when it came to effects on your character. A more minor source of variety comes in the form of map layout, as well as 2 different areas you can choose for almost every stage. For example, at the start of each game, you can choose to enter the enemy camp, the Hun camp, or Lagros village, which are different in terms of enemy type, types of hazards, and overall aesthetics of the areas. When the game first released, the enemy variety felt pretty bad to me, but they've already actually added quite a few new enemies in their weekly or so updates. And those updates have actually improved the enemy variety a lot and made each area feel more distinct. At the end of each level, you can always choose which of the 2 areas you want to explore next, so some of that variety and choice is self-driven, similar to Dead Cells. There is a decent amount of randomization and variation within each biome also, run to run, but you'll also start to see a lot of the same motifs and design elements before too long. So right now, the variety and randomness in this game feels just okay. On the character side, builds are underwhelming, and that makes that run-to-run variety also feel underwhelming. Though, again, I like those movesets and weapons. And there just isn't quite enough content yet on the enemy side, like no alternative bosses, and only moderate but improving enemy variety that make the areas feel more distinct from each other. Additionally, the final 2 or 3 areas are just not in the game yet, and along with them, the final boss is just also not in the game yet. It's just incomplete. Now let's talk about progression in Rogue Prince of Persia. At the first launch, there was only horizontal progression present, but they've added a fairly straightforward vertical progression upgrade tree as well. Both these upgrade systems use the same purple orb currency that you get from killing enemies or bosses. However, in order to actually save the currency and use it, you have to deposit in braziers you find along your run. Alternatively, you can buy upgrades from that skill tree that allow you to automatically save some purple orbs, even if you lose. Otherwise, when you die, all of your purple orbs that you have on you are lost. Horizontal progression-wise, you can buy more medallions and weapons that you can use on future runs. Some of these can be purchased from the start of the game, but most others require you to find their blueprints first and unlock them. After you have the blueprint, you can purchase all these medallions and weapons with those purple orbs. The blueprints usually come from bosses or from jumping puzzle obstacle rooms that reminded me a lot of Rogue Legacy. I quite like those rooms, but you've also seen most of them pretty quickly because, again, there just isn't that much variety there. Vertical progression-wise, or upgrades that make you more powerful run to run, you get more uses out of your healing flask, more maximum health, and other upgrades that have some specific perks, like ones that save some of your purple orbs automatically. The system feels pretty bare bones right now, but the buffs are pretty powerful. They don't directly increase your damage, but they do greatly increase your survivability by giving you more effective health through maximum health in flasks. Unlocking all these things doesn't take that much time currently, but as they keep adding upgrades and more items, medallions, etc., it'll obviously take more time to buy all of them. The game also does not currently have difficulty levels, and at the same time, it doesn't take that long to beat the final boss, even without all of those character upgrades. I beat the current final boss for the first time in a couple hours, and it was pretty easy to do a couple more times after you learn the boss's movesets. There just isn't that much to do in the game right now progression-wise. The unlocks don't take that long, and beating the final boss reliably also doesn't take that long. and it's not saved by any difficulty system. There's no challenge to climb. I'm sure they will add some of those levels in the future. Dead Cells has a great difficulty system, but it's just not here yet. So as a whole, the progression systems are decent, but like a lot of things in this game, it's missing some content and it's incomplete. Rogue Prince of Persia actually does have some deliberate cross-run story that involves finding your family and interacting with other NPCs and doing some minor puzzles of sorts. You're exploring how the Huns attacked the city, what happened to your family during that attack, as well as how your magical medallion worked, but not exactly how it should have. I've never played a Prince of Persia game, so I can't tell how this fits into that broader lore, but I liked what was present so far. Like everything else in this game, it's a nice foundation and start, but doesn't really build up to anything yet. Outside of that story, I really love the aesthetic and the vibes of this game. Each biome or area has a distinct but vibrant color palette, as well as distinct traps and hazards and overall environmental feel. I also love the music of this game, which feels like some kind of techno fusion with what I presume to be more classic Persian music. The developers did a great job with the aesthetics and the ambiance. One of the biggest questions with Rogue Prince of Persia is, will this game be Dead Cells 2.0? Evil Empire are not the original developers of Dead Cells, but they are branching off of those original developers, and they are responsible for most of the game's updates and DLC that are present in Dead Cells currently. As I said at the start of this video, my short answer is no. I do not think Rogue Prince of Persia is Dead Cells 2.0 right now, but I do still think Rogue Prince of Persia channels Dead Cells in a way that is promising. It has a similar level design feel, a similar branching path system between different areas, and similar progression and unlock system. Obviously, there are still some differences, but the more meta elements of this game channel a lot of that Dead Cells feel. But I also don't think the combat, the movement, or the build crafting felt very Dead Cells to me. I never really thought, wow, this feels like I'm playing Dead Cells, until I started to encounter those more meta elements, or some of the map design like environmental hazards. Personally, the gameplay just does not feel like Dead Cells to me, even if they are clearly drawing a lot of inspiration for the other gameplay elements. I'm not saying that either is better or either is worse, but they both feel different in how the movement, attacks, dodging versus vaulting, presence or absence of parrying, things like that just don't make these games feel that similar. And probably the biggest difference is just the sheer amount of content in Dead Cells compared to the Rogue Prince of Persia. One is overflowing with content with multiple DLCs that add great upgrades to the game, and one feels a lot more bare and incomplete. Obviously, this is to be expected given their very different points in development, but it's worth saying. I will say though, I have been happy with how they've been updating the game so far. They've already added a new biome, done a great job of fleshing out enemy variety between areas, which was one of my biggest complaints early on, and as I said earlier, they've patched all the bugs that I've run across. It's to be determined how this continues and how long this game will be in development, but I generally have a lot of faith in this studio given how they've handled the years of updates to Dead Cells after that initial release. So what's my verdict on the Rogue Prince of Persia? First and foremost, this game feels like a true early access game. It's just clearly incomplete. And for that reason alone, I don't think there's any rush to pick up this game. There just isn't enough content currently in quite a few areas, and some systems like the build crafting with medallions feel interesting, but half-baked. But I do 100% think this game is worth watching, and I enjoyed playing it as a whole. The combat and movement are surprisingly fun, snappy, and unique. I love the different environments and the ambiance of the game. The developers are clearly channeling a lot of Dead Cells for broader design principles and level design and progression, while making the actual gameplay itself feel very distinct. Because of that, I think Rogue Prince of Persia has a great core. And more than that, I've been happy to see what they've added so far. So if you're not picky with the amount of content a game has to have, there is fun to be had. But it's hard for me to currently recommend this game from $1 to hour of content ratio until some more updates roll in. Shout out to all of our channel members for helping support the channel. Please like this video to help me out in the algorithm, and thanks for watching.